Tyros 3 was the great promise of the Kepler Verge, advertised as a second cradle for humanity and its allies. The moon's surface, blanketed in ice and crystal plains, was to be reshaped with orbital mirrors and fusion pulse cores. Cities were mapped, oceans plotted, forests engineered in biolabs orbiting the primary planet. But the sun that warmed Tyros flared twice in a single year and the stabilizers failed. Core reactors detonated one by one. Atmospheric regulators fell silent. Terraforming ceased and the settlers left, all except the scattered, the hidden, and the outcast. Vera's padded feet crunched through the snow, the curve of her long vulpine legs trembling under strain. Her thick orange fur, once soft and brushed with ceremonial oils, was now matted and crusted in ice. The jagged ends of her cloak fluttered behind her like torn wings, caught in gusts that howled through the ruins of Outpost Arthas. She held Talais close, wrapped in a sling of thermofabric barely holding warmth. The boy's glowing freckles dimmed further with each breath, his small muzzle pressed to her collarbone, his tiny clawed fingers twitching, curling into her fur. "Stay with me," she whispered, her muzzle brushing his forehead. "You're fireborn, don't go dark." He whimpered but didn't reply. They had been turned away 17 times. Emergency shelters scanned her ID band and denied access. Automated turrets trained red lenses on her without mercy. No resources, no names, no credit, no humans or non-humans accepted. A mother without status. Her name had once meant something, Veracallis of the Emberkin, a bonded guardian of the birth fires on Volmer's third satellite. But that world had burned and her mate was among the ash. The elders had called her tarnished for surviving. She collapsed beneath a broken survey arch, snow collapsing around her knees. Her tail curled instinctively around her son as she crouched, shielding him. Her breath steamed into the icy air, her ears flat to her skull. "We're just resting," she told him, "just until the storm passes." But the storm never passed on Tyros. Far above, beyond a fractured ridge of silvered stone, Kalen Hale watched his relay monitor spike with motion. A heat signature, faint but real, flickered against the frost line. He swore softly, pulling on his thermal rig and sliding down the ice chute toward the valley floor. Kalen reached the valley floor at a sprint, his breath rasping through the filters of his breather mask. Snow hammered down in tight spirals, driven by gale force wind that sent fine shards slicing into his faceplate. He'd seen scavenger animals before, packs of biomod wolves or frostbats scrambling over the wreckage left behind by the Exodus, but nothing had ever pinged this close to his primary heat grid. Nothing had moved like this, slow, heavy, collapsing. He rounded a rusted half-arch from the old hydro tower and froze. Two figures, one large, one small. The first was unmistakably non-human. Her fur shone dully under a coating of rime, thick and orange, the color dimmed by ice and wind. Her form was humanoid, limbs long and elegant, shoulders narrow, hips full. Her tail, wide and lush, curled protectively around the smaller bundle at her chest. She had collapsed into the snow, one knee twisted, arms locked around what Kalen now recognized as a child. The kid's biolights, tiny freckles glowing in soft pulses across his cheeks and ears, were fading fast. "Shit," Kalen muttered, "not again." He dropped to his knees, shoving his satchel open with a gloved hand and yanking out his thermal trip kit. First the mother. He pressed the scanner node to her neck. Faint pulse, breathing but shallow. Her muzzle had frost in the fur, her lashes caked with ice. The boy's pulse was softer still but present. Kalen didn't hesitate. He triggered the tripack heater, slipping it under their bodies, then wrapped them both in his insulated cloak and lifted them into his arms. The mother weighed shockingly little, her frame was muscular but depleted, and the boy was barely more than a bundle of bones wrapped in fur and cloth. Snow churned behind him as he staggered back to his bunker. The climb back up the slope was a blur of pain. His legs burned, his knee brace flaring with every step. He nearly fell twice, once catching himself on a protruding strut and once rolling onto his side to keep the boy from sliding from his grip. When he finally slammed the hatch open, heat blasted his face and fogged his visor. The door sealed behind him with a hiss. Kalen moved fast. He laid the boy first into a cobbled-together heat cradle formed from an old mining blanket and a halogen vent pipe. The child groaned, blinking once, good still with him, then the mother. Kalen didn't dare strip her vulpine body. Heat loss was unpredictable across species lines, but he did remove the frost-covered outer cloak, exposing the rich orange fur beneath. She had elegant lines despite the grime and weathering. Her limbs were long, fingers tipped with soft retractable claws, her chest rising in shallow breaths under matted fur. "Stay," he muttered, pressing a warming disc to her sternum. "Come on, you're not done, not yet." He stripped off his gloves and jacket, kneeling between them, alternating doses of warmed electrolytes and monitoring their vitals. The boy coughed, then drank in soft sips from the dropper. His little claws wrapped around Kalen's wrist weakly, not to push away but to hold. "Salt taste," the boy mumbled, his voice thick and dreamy. Kalen blinked, then smiled, exhausted. "Close enough, kid." Only hours later did the mother stir. Vera woke not to pain but to warmth, real warmth, not the dream of heat her body had teased her with in those fatting moments beneath the storm, but solid, steady warmth that pulsed against her fur and filled the air with breath. She didn't move at first. For several long seconds, she simply breathed. Then a sound, a mechanical hiss, a low hum. She opened her eyes. The ceiling above her was curved metal, patched with old insulation, wires threaded along the edges like vines. A light blinked weakly in one corner. She felt weight across her chest, tail eyes curled against her, his tiny muzzle pressed into her shoulder. Breath warm, she could feel it, really feel it. A sharp breath escaped her lips. She jolted up too fast. Pain lanced through her lower back, her limbs trembling violently as blood rushed into places long left cold. Her tail spasmed behind her, knocking over a metal cup she hadn't noticed resting nearby. She flinched instinctively, pulling tail eyes closer. "It's okay." The voice was deep, human, and tired, not unkind. Her ears flicked as her eyes darted toward the source. A man sat across the room, arms loosely wrapped around his knees. He was tall, or maybe just lean in the way that hard labor carved a body down to its core. His skin was sallow beneath his dark beard, hair in lazy curls above brow lines etched deep by time. His jacket was open, revealing a thermopack rigged tight to his chest, still glowing faintly from transfer. He made no move to rise. "No threat, you're safe," he added, voice softer now. "Your boy too." Vera blinked at him, then looked down at Tail Eyes. His chest rose and fell in calm rhythm, his tiny ears flicking once before stilling again. His freckles glowed faintly, pale but visible. She stared at him, stunned. "I thought," her voice cracked. "I know," the man said. She stroked the boy's fur gently, tears stinging the edges of her eyes but not falling. Her fingers traced along his spine. "How long?" "Half a day, give or take. You were nearly gone when I found you." She looked up. "You brought us in." Would have been cruel not to. He reached for a flask beside him and took a swig, then offered her a nod. "Name's Kalen, engineer, scavenger sometimes, mostly tired." She didn't answer right away. Her voice was low and rusty. "Vera." He tilted his head. "Vera of the Emberkin," she added softly, almost without meaning to. Kalen didn't ask what that meant. He didn't smirk. He didn't scoff at the strange lilt of her speech or the hint of formality that clung to her tone even now. He simply said, "Then it's good to meet you, Vera of the Emberkin." She looked at him again, truly looked. His hands were reddened at the fingertips, burned slightly, probably from direct thermal transfer. His jaw was lined with exhaustion, but his eyes, they weren't filled with judgment. They were watching her like a man waiting for a fragile thing to breathe again. She held her child closer and whispered, "Thank you." Kalen gave a small nod. "No need, just rest." And for the first time in months, she did. Vera awoke again hours later. This time the haze had lifted. The ache in her limbs remained, but the deep, marrow-chilling cold was gone. She lay curled beside Tail Eyes on a thick padding of salvaged insulation wrapped in soft cloth. He was still asleep, small muzzle open slightly, a soft snore rustling through his nose. One of his hands rested against her chest, the other clutched a strip of blanket near his jaw. The warmth in the room was steady, not stifling, not false, just enough to make her bones loosen. She sat up slowly, testing her weight on her legs. The pins and needles in her feet made her wince, her tail swishing out instinctively for balance. The room was small, irregular, cluttered. Panels lined the curved walls, some lit, others blinking softly. There were makeshift solar converters patched to a microgrid on one side. An old atmospheric pump hummed with a low rhythm. Tools were scattered in neat piles, metal crates stacked in corners. A storage rack held nutrient packs, hand-bound containers, and bundles of dried moss. And across the room sat Kalen. He was half-bent over a split-open vent, elbow-deep in wiring, a tool gripped in his teeth, muttering under his breath. Vera's ears flicked. She moved slowly to her feet, keeping one eye on Tail Eyes. She padded across the floor with surprising grace for someone just recovered from a near freeze, her tail brushing the floor softly behind her. Kalen looked up just as she reached the edge of the workbench. "You should be lying down," he said, voice low but not stern. "I've lain down too long," she replied simply. He gestured to the thermoplate nearby. "Water's warm, electrolyte broth weak, but it'll help." She hesitated, then poured herself a cup. The vessel was metal, old, probably from a field ration kit. She brought it to her lips and sipped, her muzzle wrinkled at the taste. "Bitter," she muttered. Better than the alternative. He was right. Her body already felt clearer after just a few swallows. Kalen sat back and wiped his hands with a rag. "Your boy Tail Eyes right." She nodded once. "He's strong, slept through most of the night. I didn't expect him to recover so quickly." "He's fireborn," she said quietly. "They glow from within even when the sky turns to ash." Kalen studied her. "That means something where you're from." She didn't answer directly. It means he should never have been cold. The silence stretched between them, not tense but careful, like two people balancing over the edge of something delicate. Kalen broke it. You're safe here. The shelter's off the grid, buried under enough alloy and snow to be invisible to orbital scans. I built it from leftover parts of the Arthas project. She glanced toward the boy. He hasn't had safety in seasons. I figured, Kalen said, neither have you. She met his eyes, then why help us? His jaw worked for a moment before he answered. Because someone didn't help when they could have, a long time ago, I couldn't let that happen again. Vera tilted her head slightly, her ears swiveled. She studied him for a long, quiet moment. You're not what I expected, she said. I get that a lot. She let out a soft, tired sound that might have been the beginning of a laugh. Then she looked down at the cup in her hands and whispered, Thank you, Kalen. He didn't speak again, he just nodded once, slow and steady. Outside, the storm had begun to break. A pale gray light filtered in through the skylight, catching on Vera's orange fur and making it shine like the flicker of a fire in the dark. The skylight overhead was rimmed with frost, but the light that filtered through it was softer than any Vera had seen in weeks, gentler, diffused, and tinted faintly amber from the filtration glass Kalen must have salvaged from the old comm towers. It bathed the shelter in a light that didn't glare or threaten, just lingered. Tail Eyes stirred. His little body shifted under the patchwork blanket, limbs twitching slightly, then curling tighter in that instinctive sleepy motion known to all children. Vera sat beside him and placed a hand softly over his back, her claws gently brushing his fur. His ears flicked. Mama, he whispered. She bent low and nuzzled his head. I'm here, little flame. His eyes fluttered open, glowing faintly, still tired but aware. He blinked at the ceiling, then to her, then at the new space. His tiny nose twitched at the smell of metal and warmth of old circuits and human things. Then he turned his head and saw Kalen crouched near the ventilation array, tapping a control pad. Tail Eyes stared. Kalen noticed, glanced up and gave a small wave, almost awkwardly, like someone unused to being watched. You're the one who helped us, Tail Eyes asked, his voice quiet. I guess I am, Kalen said with a crooked smile. You're a lot more awake than yesterday. I was very cold, the boy said, but now it's warm. He looked up at his mother, thoughtful. Did the sun come back? Vera brushed his cheek with her knuckle. No, sweet one, the sun didn't come back, but someone else did. Tail Eyes mulled that over with the slow, deep concentration only a child could give such a thought. Then he turned to Kalen and said plainly, You're not scary. Kalen blinked, thanks, I think. You smell like engine smoke and old fruit. Vera laughed under her breath, hiding it behind her hand. Kalen looked vaguely offended but amused. Yeah, well, he said, engine smoke saved your life, kid. Tail Eyes sat up slowly and stretched. Vera helped him stay upright, adjusting the blanket around his shoulders. Kalen pushed to his feet with a small grunt, adjusting the brace on his left knee. I've got a hand mill and some dried fruit concentrate. I can make something resembling breakfast. Vera tilted her head, edible. He shrugged marginally. She smirked just slightly. Tail Eyes padded carefully across the floor on small feet and sat near the heat plate, watching Kalen with curiosity. Are you a builder? Kalen poured water into the food mill. Used to be, then everything fell apart. Now I fix things that break. Did you build this whole place? I patched it together, Kalen said, mashing the rehydrated fruit with practiced motions, from scraps mostly. Built the grid, the vent systems, the water filters. Made a life out of leftovers. Is that why you're alone? Tail Eyes asked, wide-eyed. Vera's ears twitched sharply, but Kalen just paused for a moment, then looked over his shoulder. Yeah, that's part of it. He brought over 2 steaming cups of mush, one small and one large, and passed them gently to Vera and Tail Eyes. Tail Eyes sniffed, made a face, then took a cautious bite. It tastes like hot rock. Kalen grinned. You're not the first to say that. Vera took a bite as well. It was bland, fibrous, oddly sweet, but it filled her belly with warmth. That was enough. As they ate, Kalen returned to the control panel, eyes flicking over diagnostics. This place holds, but barely, he said. Storm cycles are getting worse. If the solar lines give out, we're done. Vera set her cup down, then let me help. Kalen turned. You just nearly froze to death. I'm fine, and I know how to seal vent ducts, how to repack thermopylae. You've been doing this alone too long. He studied her expression, unreadable for a moment, then he nodded. All right, Birkin, let's see what those fire hands can do. Kalen wasn't used to company, especially not company with fur the color of sunset and eyes that watched everything like she was measuring the heat of each breath. Vera worked beside him with a grace that was both quiet and deliberate. She didn't ask for tools, she reached for the right one every time. Her fingers, tipped with small but sharp claws, moved delicately over old conduits and broken seals with the confidence of someone who'd once been trusted with fragile things. They began with the external heat vent. The panel was half seized with ice. Kalen braced the cover open with a rusted pry bar while Vera crouched beside him, her long tail flicking in steady rhythm. Snow swirled around them as she pressed her hand to the insulation foam and murmured a phrase he didn't understand, probably something from her people, a benediction maybe, a habit of memory. "You don't have to talk to the ductwork," he muttered. Her ear twitched, "Maybe it listens better than you." He grunted and shifted his weight, pressing the side console. The inner fan started to pull slowly, stuttering from half-burned power. Vera's eyes narrowed. She reached into her satchel. Kalen hadn't even noticed her grab it and pulled a strip of biowire nearly the same orange as her fur. With swift, deft hands, she layered it into the cracked circuit, sealed it with a heat patch, and sat back. The fan hummed to life. Kalen stared. "Where did you learn that?" "My people don't build shelters," she said simply, brushing the frost from her arms. "We build lives, there's a difference." When they returned inside, the warmth in the air was stronger, tangible. Even the old panels along the walls lit a little brighter. Taileyes was curled up in a nest of soft blankets Kalen had fashioned from surplus textile mesh, his small claws clutching one of the foam-stuffed toys Kalen had silently dropped nearby hours earlier. The boy snored softly, his glowing freckles now steady as stars in dim light. "He's sleeping deeply," Kalen said. Vera nodded, her eyes softening. "For the first time since my exile," she replied. She peeled off the upper layer of her makeshift suit, revealing the faint gold embroidery still clinging to the collar of her inner robe. "This fabric once meant I had purpose," she said, her voice low, "that I belonged." Kalen didn't speak. She sat on the floor near the reactor vent, soaking in the warmth, her body relaxed in ways she hadn't allowed it to in years. Kalen sat across from her, legs crossed, running diagnostics on an old handheld. "I've been meaning to ask," he said, glancing up, "why was someone like you out there? No offense, but you don't exactly look like a scavenger." Vera looked away. "I was cast out." Kalen blinked, surprised at the bluntness, but he said nothing, waiting. "My mate died during the fall of Volmer 3. He was a guardian bonded through fire rites. When I returned to our enclave with Taileyes, they said I'd brought ruin, that no child should be raised in the cold." Her eyes didn't meet his. "They said I'd poisoned the light in him, that surviving makes you broken to them." "That's cruel," Kalen said, jaw tight. "It's what they believe. Warmth is a sacred thing to the Emberkin. To lose it is a sign of spiritual fracture. And surviving makes you broken to them." "Oh yes." Kalen let the silence settle between them, then they were wrong. Vera looked up sharply, but he didn't flinch from her gaze. "You carried that boy across a dead world with nothing but instinct and will," Kalen said, his voice low. "That's not broken, that's fire." She didn't reply, but her eyes didn't leave his for a long time. Later that night, after Taileyes had been tucked in and the last of the diagnostics blinked green, Kalen brought over a pair of worn mugs filled with synthetic broth. She took hers, fingers brushing his. They sat close to the heater now, not quite touching but no longer across the room. "You've built something here," Vera said softly, staring at the makeshift shelter walls. "Yeah," he murmured, "but maybe now it's not just mine anymore." Her tail coiled near his boot, not quite touching but close, and neither of them moved away. In the days that followed, Vera and Kalen settled into a rhythm. Not perfect, Kalen still preferred silence when he worked, and Vera sometimes vanished into long stares out the skylight, but it was a rhythm nonetheless. She repaired the ducting in the east wing with her fireproof mesh wraps, and Kalen finally stabilized the water filtration tank using an improvised siphon and Vera's strange fiberseal knots. She showed him how to line the sleeping platform with woven cloth from heat-resistant flora, creating insulation far better than synthetic padding. He taught her how to recalibrate power pulses from the solar receiver array using only a stripped wire and a steady hand. Sometimes they spoke, sometimes they didn't need to, but every time she passed him, every time he looked her way, something unspoken lingered, something that hadn't existed when she collapsed into the snow. Warmth. It wasn't fire, not yet, but it glowed. One morning, Kalen found Vera outside, hood down, tail swaying as she stood with her eyes closed, face tilted to the pale light overhead. Her orange fur caught the faint glint of morning through fractured sky. He didn't interrupt. Instead, he checked the perimeter beacon. That's when he saw the flash. A flicker of motion across the ridge line to the east, too fast to be natural, too directed to be a scavenger animal. He narrowed his eyes, adjusting the sensor range. A thermal spike, just one, then gone. He scanned again, nothing, but something in his gut twisted. He went back inside. Vera, he said as she stepped in behind him, snow melting off her shoulders. I need to check Relay 9. She tilted her head, sharp ears angling toward him, that far out. Yeah, he hesitated, just to be sure. She narrowed her eyes. You saw something. I think I did. Taileyes looked up from where he was playing with a pile of soft stones near the vent. Are you going away? Kalen knelt beside him, not far, little flame, just for a bit. Taileyes blinked up at him, then nodded solemnly and handed Kalen a stone. For luck, he said. Kalen's throat tightened slightly. Thanks, buddy. Vera pulled on her cloak. I'm coming with you. He stood. No, it could be. You let me stand with you, she said, voice firm. Let me walk beside you too. Kalen met her eyes. Something flared between them, not just fire now. Trust, he nodded. Taileyes watched them go, sitting on the floor like a little sentinel, one hand clutching the spare glove Kalen had left behind. Outside, the cold bit harder than it had in days. They moved in silence, Kalen's pack clipped to his back, Vera's tail trailing through the snow like a banner. As they reached the ridge, Vera turned her head slightly, ears twitching. You felt it too, she murmured. He didn't ask how, she just knew. The wind screamed as they reached the relay. The panel was open, no frost on the edge. Tampered. Kalen dropped to one knee, Vera crouched beside him. What does it mean? He looked up at her, face pale. It means someone knows we're here. Kalen worked fast. His fingers moved over the control pad, eyes scanning corrupted data lines and signal bleed. Whoever had accessed the relay hadn't wiped their trace. They had been rushed, maybe careless. A data burst had pinged outward on an old sub-frequency, one meant for orbital surveyors. Low power, limited range, but still dangerous. Vera crouched beside him, her tail low and still, the fur along her arms slightly bristled. Can you stop it? I can kill the transmitter, but if the ping was received, we're not alone anymore. Vera didn't flinch. How long do we have? Kalen sealed the panel with a hard hiss and stood, brushing snow from his jacket. Hard to say. Days, maybe less if it was close-range scavengers. Could be. He paused. Could also be corporate cleanup. Some patrols sweeping through to claim salvage or erase what's left. They bring weapons. Kalen's look answered that. They climbed down in silence. The wind had picked up again, sharper now. It hissed between broken metal struts like breath through teeth. Vera pulled her hood tighter and glanced at Kalen, whose jaw was set like iron. Do you still want to stay? She asked quietly. He didn't look at her, more than ever. They reached the shelter's hatch and descended into heat. Taileyes met them halfway down the stairs, his eyes wide and questioning. You're both okay? Vera lifted him into her arms. Yes, little flame, for now. Kalen moved to the console and shut down the last receiver manually. He switched their beacon frequency, then blacked out all external solar nodes not essential for survival. We go dark, he said. No heat flares, no light bloom, no transmission. Vera laid Taileyes on his bedding, smoothing his hair as he stared at the ceiling. His voice was small. Someone bad is coming. She kissed his forehead. We don't know yet. He blinked at her, but I feel it. Kalen paused, glancing over. He's sensitive, Vera murmured. It's part of the glow. Fireborn children can sense changes in rhythm, heat, light, even fear. Kalen stepped closer, crouching beside the boy. Then we'll need you to keep listening, little Ember. Can you do that for us? Taileyes nodded solemnly. I'll listen real good. That night the shelter remained dark. No heater hummed, no tools were used. The vents whispered low and steady, and every creak in the walls made Kalen's hand move near his belt where he kept an old plasma cutter, repurposed as a weapon. Vera didn't sleep. She stood near the viewport for hours, watching frost gather on the outer seal, her fur glowing in the low amber emergency light. Her ears twitched at every sound. Kalen approached without speaking. He stood beside her, arms folded. You regret saving us? She asked softly. Never, he looked at her, then really looked. You've changed this place, he said. I used to think surviving meant staying hidden, quiet, alone, but now. Her eyes turned to his. Now. Now it feels like it matters. She reached out slowly, her clawed fingers brushing the back of his hand. I won't let them take this from us, she whispered. I won't either. Behind them, Taileyes stirred in his sleep, murmuring words in a soft language neither of them recognized. Outside, the snow deepened, and far away someone listened. The sound came just after dawn. It wasn't loud, not a bang, not a crash, just a low mechanical work click followed by the subtle shudder of metal under pressure. Kalen's eyes snapped open. He was on his feet before the sound repeated, already moving toward the console. Vera was up before he reached it. I heard it too, she said, pulling on her outer cloak. Her ears were angled back alert. Kaelin leaned close to the screen. Trip line 3 outer perimeter, something crossed into the east approach, not an animal too heavy. Vera's tail flicked once, tension coiled through every inch of her posture. How long until they reach us? 10 minutes, maybe less. She turned toward Tailai's sleeping form, wrapped tight in his blanket nest. We have to go. Kaelin hesitated. We could hold the entrance, trap the lower corridor. I've got proximity charges. Vera turned slowly, her eyes glowing softly. You'd risk your life fighting for a shelter made of scrap. No, he said simply, I'd risk it for what's inside. Vera stared at him. Kaelin reached into his emergency locker and pulled out a small, tightly wrapped satchel. There's a ravine about a click northeast. If I drop the charges in the service tunnel, I can buy time enough for you to reach the tunnel entrance. You're not coming. I'll follow, but if they're corporate and they find someone like me protecting someone like you, he didn't finish. Vera stepped forward and pressed a hand to his chest. Don't say goodbye like it's a plan, she whispered. You said this wasn't just yours anymore. He nodded, breath tight. Then we don't run, we defend. Tailai stirred, blinking in the low light. What's happening? Vera moved to him quickly, nailing. There are people outside, sweet flame, but we're going to be okay. I need you to stay low, stay quiet, and listen for our voices. His eyes widened like a little fire under the ash. Exactly. Kaelin passed Vera a signal pulse reader and a compact energy blade. It's old tech but sharp. You'll feel the handle heat when something's close. She held it like she'd used one before. Her stance shifted, tighter, balanced, ready. Then came the second sound, closer, metal on snow. Kaelin stepped to the console and triggered the primary lockdown. Shutters slammed down over the outer vents. Magnetic bolts sealed the main entry corridor. Whatever's coming, he said, they're not walking away untouched. Vera glanced at the boy, then we stand. Tailai's peeked from his blanket and whispered, You're both glowing. Neither answered, but for the first time since the wind took her past life, Vera felt it, not just warmth, not just survival. Fire. The first impact rattled the outer hatch. Not a knock, an intentional strike. Something heavy slammed into the shielding, followed by the hiss of plasma tools heating the frame. Kaelin watched the pressure gauge drop 2 degrees. They were cutting in. They're not scavengers, he said grimly. Too clean, too precise. Then they're hired, Vera replied, her voice tight, body crouched in the corridor's mouth. Corporate sweepers here to erase anyone left. Kaelin checked the power feed. We have minutes. Then let's give them nothing worth reporting. The shelter's walls groaned under the next blast, this time accompanied by a burst of steam and a shriek of metal failing under heat. Tailai's whimpered from his hidden cubby behind the thermal coil. Vera was there in 2 strides. She knelt and pressed her forehead to his. Stay curled, stay quiet. You're the heart of the flame, little one, don't forget. His tiny hand gripped her wrist tightly. Don't go dark, mama. I won't, she whispered, not ever again. She stood and strode to Kaelin's side as he popped open the lower utility tunnel. He handed her 2 more pulse bombs. Place these near the crawl ducts. When they breach, we channel them into choke points. You take the north line, I'll take the main. Vera nodded, not questioning his plan. Her grip on the blade was steady, the glow of her freckles pulsing softly like embers under her fur. The final breach came in a scream of sundered steel. A narrow tear opened in the hatch, and through it stepped a figure in black and virile armor, rifle drawn, visor gleaming. Kaelin fired first. The blast caught the soldier in the shoulder, spinning him back with a hiss of cracked shielding. Another moved through faster, and Vera was already there. She moved like flame. Her blade arced through the air, slicing through the extended rifle with a shower of sparks. The invader stumbled, and she twisted, using the momentum to slam her shoulder into his chest. He crashed back into the corridor wall, dazed. Kaelin triggered the pulse trap. The chamber lit in white-blue flash, concussive force blasting back another 2 shadows. Stepping through the breach-hen came the voice, cold, mechanical.